And now we're going to find a midpoint. A midpoint, of course, is right in the middle. So here we've got a piece of long 7-foot board. You put something in the middle, it starts to sag, so we want to put some support there. How are we going to determine the midpoint of the 7-foot board? Well, you got 7 feet. You want to find the middle? You'd measure it, but how? You just go a little bit each. Take off an inch. Take off an inch. Take off. That would work.
Take off like a feet, and then once you get to like the final foot, then you go like inches, centimeters, that's how you know the exact center.
Or you could just take your 7 feet and cut it in half. What would you get if you cut 7 feet in half? You would get 3.5 feet. So you could measure 3.5 feet. Now, if you go to your measuring tape and you were measuring 3.5 feet, you might go, okay, I hit 3 feet. How do I measure 1/2 foot? How many inches would that be? 6 inches. So you could say, or 3 feet and 6 inches. That would be another way of saying the same thing. Now, if you don't like going to the decimals, you could start by saying, well, since there are 12 inches in a foot, I know that 7 feet is 84 inches. Maybe 84 is an easier one to cut in half. Half of 84 is 42 inches. And 42 inches is, of course, exactly the same as 3 feet and 6 inches. So 2 different ways of finding a midpoint. One, we could take our measurement in feet already and cut it in half, or we could take it and convert it to inches and cut in half. It depends on what you find is easier to measure. So if you have your measuring tape and your measuring tape, you measure out 7 feet and you also see 84 inches, you might find it easier to cut the 84 in half, because then you can go right to 42 on your measuring tape to figure out how long it's going to be. Here's one for you to try. Picture frame. You want to hang it straight on the wall. You need a loop at the midpoint. Not a very good idea to make a loop here and put one nail. You're not going to have a very nice picture frame on your wall. Unless you took your picture of your family crooked already, right? Then you might need to frame your picture crooked just so that they end up being straight. Ooh, sounds like a... So you take 35 centimeters and cut it in half. 17.5 centimeters. If you wanted to do that in millimeters. So 17.5 centimeters is equal to how many millimeters? How do we do that? We could use a proportion. We could go to our formula sheet, and our formula sheet says that in 1 centimeter, we get 10 millimeters. So if we want to know how many millimeters is 17.5, we could set up a proportion. We don't know how many millimeters for 17.5. We know that there are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. Again, we set up our units the same. You can multiply both sides by 17.5. And voila, we get 175 millimeters. Some of you are probably pretty good at deciding when you need to multiply and when you need to divide when you're converting. And you might say, well, if 1 centimeter is 10 millimeters, 17.5 centimeters, I'm going to need to multiply by 10 to figure that out, and you get 175 millimeters. So our proportion is there if we're ever unsure. But if you remember the shortcut, you can do that as well. So again, some to try for the last 15 minutes in class.